Blog Talk Radio.
Carol the Coach. Sex, love, and relationships. We talk about it here.
Carol the Coach. Compassion with contemporary relevance.
I am a psychotherapist. I can be your personal life coach, and I can help you with your issues. There are no problems too small or too big. You can talk about anything.
Speaker, columnist, radio TV host, and commentator. Carol the Coach brings messages of wellness and empowerment within reach of everyday people every day.
Almost 5 years ago, I lost my soulmate in an accident. He was killed in a plane crash. Life just, for me, has seemed to stop.
There are groups all over the city. I teach one. It is a specific way to start thinking so that you shift how you see the world, which then shifts your energy, and then you feel better and you actually see things differently.
Carol the Coach. Always available too at carolthecoach.com.
Now I've got Russell on the line.
I'm 47 years old. I'm a truck driver. I am married. I have a wife in San Francisco.
Okay.
I haven't been home in 6 months. My thing is, I don't know if I have a sex addiction or what the problem is. Why do I want what I can't have? And as soon as I can have it, I don't want it anymore.
You're right on target when you say, I don't know if I have a sexual addiction. Well, guess what? Yes, you do. And you know what? That's my specialty, Russell. So you're at the right place. Continue.
I meet women online, and I'm in a different part of the country. I travel all 48 states, so I love sex.
I hear self-esteem issues. You never felt good enough, and you didn't feel like you were getting what you should have then, and you're reenacting that now. Do you want to change that about yourself?
You get what you need.
I got an interesting email this week. He said
that, you were listening last week. It wasn't this week. It was last week. It was from a man who said that he really wanted to develop a healthy sexual health plan. His wife was asking him for it. He has fetishes, and he's act out. And, the deal is that he wanted to prove to his wife that he's willing to do what it takes to make his life better. So in acting out, he had absolutely recovered from that behavior, but he didn't know what a healthy sexual plan looked like. Well, I am excited to announce that I've got a certified sexual addictions therapist who is going to be talking to us. She's actually a certified sex therapist who has 100% online sex therapy practice. She specializes in integrating healthy sexuality into recovery. Wow, how lucky are we? We're going to be talking to Rhiannon Beauregard. She's also a marriage and family therapist, so she gets couples, and she gets sexual addiction, and she gets sexual issues around sex addiction. So she's going to be talking a little bit about that tonight, as well as she's going to be helping us to understand how can you treat somebody online? How is that effective? And you guys all know that the world is coming to more and more and more technology. It's technology that got you into trouble, but it's also technology that can help you out. It can actually connect you to people that you wouldn't be able to get to if it weren't for Skype or Zoom or phones or webcams. So I can't wait to talk with Rhiannon Beauregard about Sex Therapy-Online, which is our online sex addiction therapy program. She provides to clients living in Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, and Texas. All of our sessions take place online using a secure and encrypted video conferencing system, or it happens over the phone. And I know a lot of you think, oh, my goodness, I've been working on recovery for a while, and I do want to figure out what is healthy sexuality, and I do want to get back to that in my relationship. Now, you've heard me say it before, that lots of sex addicts have developed compulsive sexual behavior because they got involved in some sort of chatting, sexting, texting, or pornography, and before they knew it, they were looking for the next new thing. And those are people that didn't have any unusual wounds. They didn't have any sexual trauma reenactment. They just started out like anybody else, and because they had ADD, or they had some obsessive-compulsive disorder, or they even just had obsessive-compulsive features, their life got the best of them, and they couldn't get enough of the compulsive behavior. Okay, that's one type of person. The other type of person is the person who has some sort of sexual trauma reenactment. You know, for instance, I was talking to a man the other day, and he was a Jehovah's Witness. And he wanted to do things that other kids wanted to do. He wanted to be on the basketball team. He wanted to play football. He wanted to go to parties, and his parents never let him. In addition to that, he was molested at about the age of 12. Well, he'll tell me he wasn't molested, but what happened was somebody in his, at his church, a young teen, exploited him. She used him to excite her. And as a young teen, he didn't know what was going on, but he knew that it was wrong, and he felt excited. And those two feelings fused. And because they fused, it set him up for a pattern whereby he looked for sexually provocative situations that felt wrong but were exciting. It created all sorts of physiological reactions within him. And when he felt those feelings, he was reenacting the trauma he felt at 12, 13, or 14 years of age. Now, here's what the general public doesn't understand. That kind of experience can lead to all sorts of sexually addictive behaviors as you get older. You know, I was trying to explain to my group tonight that it's the same thing as when a female is sexually molested by her father, her stepfather, her uncle, whatever, at ages 8, 9, 10, or 11. And because, again, it can feel pleasurable, but it's fused with fear, it's fused with shame, it's fused with guilt because she knows it's wrong, she then begins to become promiscuous, A, because she can control that. It's not being done to her. And B, unconsciously she feels, or even subconsciously she feels, those effects that were so triggering in her childhood as an adult. But instead of feeling like a victim, she feels like she's in control. And that's that same type of experience. You, the normal public, although I doubt that I have very many people who are just listening to this show for educational purposes, I'm sure for most people there is some tie to sexual addiction, whether you're the partner of a sex addict or a sex addict. For the normal public, they would say, well, she has lots of choices. She doesn't have to act out sexually. She doesn't have to exploit. She doesn't have to be promiscuous. He doesn't have to become sexually addicted. But, you know, the psyche is an unusual thing. If you don't get your needs met in childhood, if your needs are violated as a kid, oftentimes we recreate those same situations. So if your parents didn't nurture and love you as a child, you will likely find a partner who doesn't nurture and love you as an adult. You may have heard it on Dr. Phil. You may have heard it on Anderson Cooper. You may have heard it on intervention. But whatever occurs in our childhood ends up feeling familiar, and then we reenact that familiarity. We reenact that familiarity as an adult, and we play it over and over and over again until the pain becomes too great. And then what happens? Pain becomes too great, and the person says, I need to stop this behavior. Now, for the man I'm talking about, who was a Jehovah's Witness that never felt like he fit in, was reenacting the trauma. He was objectifying women. He felt a lot of eroticized rage. And in feeling the eroticized rage, he was getting back the perpetrator that took advantage of him at 11, 12, or 13, but he was getting back that woman by objectifying and exploiting women in his present-day life. Does that make sense? Okay, so think back to your own life. Are you an addict because you got involved in something that became habitual and compulsive and you didn't think you could stop? Or are you an addict because something devastating happened to you as a child and you're reenacting the trauma now? And I would suggest that either one of those behaviors sends signals that something is wrong and you need to stop, and yet that can be very, very difficult. Without the help of a certified sexual addictions therapist, that's me. And if you are one of those people, I would implore you to go to www.sexhelp.com. Look for a certified therapist in your area by putting in your zip code or your state or your country and finding out who's available. And if by chance you live in a remote area that doesn't have a CSAT, a certified sexual addictions therapist, then look for somebody who can Skype, who can Zoom, who can telephone coach you so that you begin to get the help that you need. Because what I promise you is that this is not going to go away. This is going to get worse and worse and worse. That's what sexual addiction is about. I hate to scare you, but behavior never stays the same. It gets worse and worse and worse. And you begin to feel so out of control that it promotes a lot of shame and guilt. And as a result, what ends up transpiring is that makes you want to act out even further. And so it is an auto-exacerbating cycle. You know, here you felt bad. You felt like there was something wrong with you. You act out even more, which confirms there's something wrong with you. Okay, you are listening to Carol the Coach, and we are here every Monday night at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we interview some of the experts in the world, and I have to tell you, they provide so much information that you wouldn't even know is out there. And tonight, I have never talked with a sex therapist who works online, and I am thrilled to be doing so. And that's the beauty of my training, is that I get to find out all about all these very talented people. So I'm going to be talking to Rhiannon Beauregard, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified sex therapist who has 100% online sex therapy practice. So how lucky are you? She doesn't necessarily live in your area, but you're going to be able to get help from her. So, again, I am so excited to be working with her. So welcome to the show, Rhiannon. How are you tonight?
I'm wonderful, Carol. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. I was so thrilled to hear that you had this practice that you could help anybody in the world with their own sexual health. So can you tell me a little bit about your practice and how you develop these services and in actuality, what are the services that you do provide?
I'd love to tell you a little bit about my practice. So I own and operate Sex Therapy Online, which is a 100% online sex therapy practice that specializes in working with clients with sexual functioning and sexual addiction issues. You'll probably hear me kind of interchangeably use sexual functioning and sexual dysfunctioning, problematic sexual behavior, compulsive behavior, sex addiction, sex and love addiction, because depending on your listenership, different people might define their issues in different ways. So I just want to be sensitive to the language, but recognizing that I kind of use a lot of that interchangeably. I just want to mention that very quickly. And I'm based out of Austin, Texas, and I am licensed in 5 states. So while my services can be accessed anywhere, I really do only operate in those 5 states as a sex therapist. And I can talk a little bit more about why I've structured my practice like that. But plus, working in the states of Maine, New Hampshire, New York, Massachusetts, and Texas, I am certainly very busy with helping all of those clients in those states. So, but I can talk a little bit more about why I limit my practice as a sex therapist to those states. I do some coaching in different states, and then some states allow some out-of-state practice. But I really do function as a licensed marriage and family therapist in my practice. So the services I offer online, as I mentioned, is sex therapy. I do also offer sex education, counseling, and coaching. I specialize in working with individuals and couples and different relationships as well. So not all relationships are in a coupleship. And I also provide kind of a unique service where I provide an initial assessment and then a written assessment document to folks that are looking, that maybe are working with another therapist but are looking for some expertise in the field of sex or sex addiction to contribute to their already established clinical work. And that's basically a 60-minute session, and then I provide them with a very detailed written report that they can take back to their therapist or their doctor or whoever they're working with that can kind of give some ideas of what I think is going on and what are some goals for treatment. I also offer for professionals consultation, collaboration, and supervision. I am an AMFT approved supervisor and a certified supervisor in the state of New Hampshire and Texas. And I also offer mentoring for online therapy work. So if we have clinicians that are listening tonight that are interested in maybe taking some of their work online, and maybe hopefully I'll convince a bunch of folks out there on why online is really a great way to offer services. I do provide mentoring to kind of get that up and started because it does seem a little daunting if you're not familiar with how to operate online or over the phone. So that's a little bit about my practice. As you had mentioned, I am an ASEX certified sex therapist, and I am trained specifically in working with sexual functioning issues and sex addiction. And I'm also in recovery myself. So really so excited. I'm a big fan of the show. I rarely miss an episode, and I'm just really excited to talk a little bit about what I'm passionate about in this field and to be part of this elite club of amazing and incredible clinicians that all care so passionately about our field. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Well, absolutely. This is so very exciting to be able to talk to somebody. Last week, I literally did have somebody who said his wife was insisting that he put together a sexual health plan. And he said, Carol, I don't even know what that is. So sometime tonight I'm going to ask you about what is a good sexual health plan, and I realize that depends very much so on customizing it for the normal person that's asking you, the addict in recovery, whatever. But tell me a little bit about what online therapy is and how does it work?
Gladly. So when we use the term online therapy, it can be called a variety of different things depending on the state or the clinician you're working with. So it's sometimes called distance therapy, teletherapy, telemental health, all these different names for it. But basically, it's a distance-based modality that uses technology to work with clients. And I'm going to argue very briefly today, but I just want to put it out there that being an online therapist, I believe that online therapy is a model of treatment in and of itself. It's not just a way of delivering services. It's actually a model of therapy on its own right. So I won't get too much into that, but my style of therapy online is much different and at times much more effective than in office work. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is. So I always get the question of why it's a good choice for clients and partners working with sexual issues and sex addiction. And if I may, I'd love to kind of dive into why I think it's just, the bee's knees. I just love working online, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So go ahead and let us know about why it's important, and also very specific. It's not just about the way you provide the service, but the service itself.
Yes. So I think what gets me most excited about working online is the idea that I can bring services to people who normally don't have access to those services. So I work in 5 states, as I mentioned, and those 5 states have a huge rural population. And in the state of New Hampshire, there's such a desperate need for folks that specialize in the field of sex or sex addiction that most of the clients there are so underserved that the idea that I can be accessible to anyone in these states is really exciting for me. So the big thing is bringing quality services to those that need it. That's really why I work online, is because I work with clients that are 6 to 8 hours away from the nearest therapist, let alone the nearest sex therapist or person who specializes in working with sexual compulsivity or sex addiction. The other aspect about it that I think is really important, and I'm sure your listeners can understand this, is that privacy is really important. I started working started working more specifically with Addicts in a small rural town in New Hampshire. And everybody knew who I was, and everybody knew who the reason why people were coming into my office has something to do with sex. And many of my clients didn't feel comfortable walking into my office or being seen in the office building. And so the privacy that is afforded for my clients is so much greater than having to be kind of in the public eye. I work in the state of New York, so this includes the metropolitan area of New York City, and I have a lot of high-profile clients that it would be very damaging to their public image and their career if they were seen at the sex therapist office or going for treatment for sex addiction. So working online really affords that confidentiality and privacy that I think is so important for our clients as they work towards recovery. The other area that I really love working online is that a lot of people have a hard time talking about sex. I'm obviously not one of those, and neither are you, because we work in this industry, but I have found that people, they're very uncomfortable talking about sex, healthy sex and problematic sex. And so working online, I think, provides an opportunity for clients to be a little bit more comfortable. You're not going to also run into me in the grocery store if you live in a different state. So there can be a sort of an afforded layer of protection around embarrassment on that end too. My clients find it very convenient. They can see me on their lunch hour in their office, or I have kind of this small niche of young parents who put their kids to bed and then they see me online. And otherwise, I don't think that they would be able to access a therapist if they didn't have that ability to put the kids to bed and see me. So clients often cite it being very convenient. One of my favorite reasons why I feel like online therapy is great is it allows me to see my clients in their natural environment. So I tell this story that I had a long-term client with some sexual functioning concerns, low desire, didn't initiate sex with their partner. And so I was seeing them as a couple. And once I started to see them online, I saw that they were not alone in therapy, and they're probably not alone in their bedroom because they had 4 chihuahuas crawling all over them during our therapy session. So that gave me some really great insight to understand that, perhaps it was some of the environmental and contextual concerns that were contributing to their disconnect sexually. So I love being able to see my client in their natural environment, and I think my clients are more comfortable there as well. And when we're talking about uncomfortable situations, the more comfortable my clients can be, the better. You alluded to this in the introduction, but talking about how so much of our problematic sexual behavior and sex addiction takes place on the internet. And I really do believe that treating internet-based issues on the internet makes sense to me. Our issues don't occur in 4 walls of an office. They occur out in our reality. And it makes sense that we would use the internet to redefine the client's behavior in therapy instead of in problems and addiction. So, just a brief sort of mention of the fact that it's good on resources. Clients aren't spending time, money, gas, energy, getting to and from appointments. Instead of maintaining 2 offices, I maintain 1. And just in general, I think it's better for the environment. So it's just like kind of something brief to mention, but I think it's important. And really, I love the accessibility around increasing the therapeutic opportunities for everyone. I mentored a clinician who was starting out on online therapy because she had a long-term client that had an amputation and couldn't access therapy for a while, if not indefinitely. And online therapy gave the opportunity for their therapeutic process to continue. And I think that folks who are uncomfortable or have difficulty with mobility, sometimes transitioning folks, so transgender individuals who are transitioning who might be a little bit uncomfortable in the point of their transition, it really increases their therapeutic opportunity. So as you can tell, I'm really excited and enthusiastic about this field. I do feel a little bit of a pioneer in it, and it is a little provocative to traditional therapy, but I really feel like it has a lot to offer, and I just love doing this work.
Well, absolutely. Now, say that there is somebody who has a sexual addiction, who's in recovery, who either wants some help with the sexual addiction or has been in recovery long enough that he wants to gain some sexual health in his own recovery or her own recovery. He or she calls you, you set up an appointment, and that's either a telephone meeting or that is actually in person. Well, not in person, but it is through a webcam, through Zoom, through Skype. What do you find absolutely ensures confidentiality if they're going to see you face-to-face via a video cam?
So this is a great question, and one question that I always get, and I'd love to talk a little bit about how I operate. I know people do a lot of different ways of doing the distance-based therapy. So my preferred method of interacting with my clients is through a HIPAA-compliant and secure and encrypted video conferencing system. It's designed for doctors and therapists. And ensures the minimum level of the HIPAA compliance. What's great about that system as well is that if my clients prefer not to use the video conferencing, we can also do audio and just turn off the camera. What I really get excited about is the text-based therapy. And before everyone sort of jumps on me and imagines me kind of like, sitting on the subway texting a client therapeutic interventions, that's not what I'm talking about. Basically, it's a live chat. And so I use this example of I had a client years ago that had a chronic and persistent stutter. And talk therapy was really not a functional way of this client to communicate. So what we did a live chat where he could see me and I could see him. He would type to me and I would speak to him. And not only did I find that increased the accessibility option for that client to receive effective services, but I think that, it's my personal belief that we access a different part of the brain through writing than we do verbal ability. And that's why we do therapeutic journaling and writing assignments and things like that. And it was very exciting, and it is very exciting to see folks reach a different level of therapeutic progress through typing and writing. So those are kind of the three options. When all else fails, I use the phone, but I prefer to use that system because I can, reasonably assure HIPAA compliance and confidentiality, although there's some, it's difficult to really in this day and age completely ensure 100% confidentiality, but best efforts and practices are made to do that.
And just right now, since people may be going, well, how would I ever find her? Basically, you're saying that obviously you choose to work in the following states: Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, and Texas. So any of our listeners who live in those states can contact you, and they either contact you through www.sextherapy-online.com, or they can reach you at Rhiannon, which is RHIANNON at sextherapy-online.com. And so they can set up an appointment, and that can be anything from, obviously, a HIPAA-compliant encrypted video cam service, or they can do what you call video conferencing, or they can also contact you over the phone or through chatting through, again, that encrypted conferencing system, correct?
That's correct, and I'm sure you can understand why video camming might not be what I would want to call it based on some of the needs of our clients.
Yeah, I know.
The reason why I also say conferencing
I get
too,
that.
because,
You're right. I absolutely get that, because that could have been one of their triggers in their acting out behaviors, is using their video cam. But truly, what service do you use? You're not using Skype. That's not HIPAA compliant. Would that be Zoom?
I actually use a service that is called Secure Video, but there are plenty of other services that are out there. I've just found I've really appreciated this. So I get no endorsement, so it's just from my experience. And they have a 24-hour customer service line, which is very helpful for my clients. If they have any issues, they can call. So they handle all the customer service ends on that. And so if there are any technology concerns, they'll support the client and myself. So that's the system that I use. And what's great about it as well is that it can multi-conference people in. So if, for example, we have a lunchtime meeting and a partner is at work and another partner is at work, we can do it provided that the clients can ensure confidentiality on their end. We can meet as a group that way. So there's opportunities for us to meet with multiple people in multiple locations, which has been really great because I have a lot of clients that work in the tri-state New England area but live in various states. So because I'm licensed in those states and I work in those states, online therapy is a relatively new field. It receives a lot of scrutiny and criticism from the boards of mental health. And pretty much across the board, you are recommended, required. It really depends state to state because it is such a new field. It's being very newly regulated. A lot of states don't even have any rules on the book about it. But because I'm operating as a licensed marriage and family therapist, I only work in the states I'm licensed in because those are laws associated with those states. It is constantly changing, so anyone that is interested in working in online therapy, that's why I offer my mentoring services so that we can keep abreast to those regulations and laws. It's a very exciting field, but it is a little scary. I liken it to when the psychoanalysis changed from looking away on the couch to looking towards. I imagine that was a pretty scary transition in our field, and I think online therapy ruffles the same amount of feathers. But that's why I work in those states. I would love to work in more states, but until the licensing laws allow for that, I only work in those 5 states.
Okay, so then are you telling us that those 5 states out of the 52 states that we have right now are the only ones that allow this kind of system?
No. Those states require you to be, in order to see a client living in the state of Maine, I have to be licensed in the state of Maine. So actually, all 50 states,
yeah, because very clearly one of the things that I offer, not psychotherapy through an encrypted video conferencing system, but I do offer consultation. You know, I'm a therapist and I'm a coach, and so I can offer consultation and coaching, and there are no rules or regulations that stop me from doing that. So somebody can contact me, and I can get them set up with 12-step groups. I can get them set up with the proper books. I can get them set up with a whole procedural treatment plan that they can begin to work on their own until they find somebody, of course, which I help them with, somebody that has at least some of the credentials to get them where they want to go. So I was just checking with you. You know, clearly, you're right. You probably have more business than you even want. And then what I heard you saying is that you're more than happy to work with clinicians to talk about how you start this kind of business. So you're there for the clinician and you're there for the client and his or her wife or partner. So that's really, really exciting. And I find that you're just in the way that sexual addiction is a brand new field. We know sexual addiction has always been there, but truly the treatment of sexual addiction recovery is pretty new. And so is using any kind of video conferencing system or phone coaching. So I admire the fact that you are a pioneer in your field. You're obviously innovative.
Well, thank you, Carol. And yes, you as well. And I think that the services that both you and I provide and other practitioners that are working at our distance are absolutely essential. And any way that they're provided is so important for the community and for folks that are underserved in their area. So I want to applaud you for all of the work that you have been doing as well, because it's really been helping a lot of people.
Well, thank you so much. So now let's get down to the brass tacks. What do you believe is the relationship between sex addiction and issues with sexual functioning?
Okay, I'm happy to talk. I love talking about sex. This is like I'm rolling up my sleeves, ready to dive in, and I'll use up as much time as I can because this is truly my passion around of talking about healthy sexuality. So first and foremost, there is a huge correlation for an addict or someone who identifies as having problems with sexual compulsivity and or their partner of having a sexual functioning concern. So what do I mean about sexual functioning concerns? So many folks would call this a sexual dysfunction. I prefer to use a little bit more of a sex positive term around sexual functioning, kind of like, you know, making the assumption that we can function and not we're in dysfunction. So these are our desire issues, our libido, no libido, limited libido. These are erectile issues, anorgasmia, premature ejaculation. I'm using kind of common terms, even though I use some different terms around early ejaculation or pre-orgasmia and things like that, but I'll use some common terms here. We're talking about sexual pain and a variety of other sexual functioning concerns, and I see a very large correlation between folks that have problems with sex addiction and sexual functioning issues. And the big component here is that sometimes it can be a contributing factor of the addiction, sometimes even the cause. And I use that term very lightly, so the cause of the addiction, or it can be as a result of the addiction and the problematic behavior. So I'll give two quick examples. One is that you have a man who's having trouble with his erection, and he thinks, okay, well, if I watch more pornography and it just gets more extreme and I go really more hardcore, I'll be able to maintain my erection. Or maybe it's my partner and I need more partners and more excitement, or maybe I need a third partner. And so in efforts to kind of resolve the problem, you start to see the behavior. Or there's plenty of research studies that are out there around how prolonged and excessive use of pornography can contribute to erectile problems. So the sexual functioning concern can either contribute to the cause of the addiction or be a result of it. And another thing I find as well, and it makes me sad to know that people are going to identify with this, but it can also be used as an excuse. So if, for example, the partner has low desire, which is way more than just low desire. Usually there's multi-causal factor, and a lot of it has to do with relationship issues. But if my wife gave me more sex, I wouldn't go to the pornography. My wife gave me more sex, I wouldn't go have sex with prostitutes. So this functioning issue within the relationship then gets used as an excuse for the behavior. And I'm simplifying this because I truly believe that all issues are multi-causal. So I do not want to say like A plus B equals C, because that's not what I'm saying. But just to give you an idea of what I think the relationship between sexual functioning concerns and sexual addiction is, I kind of simplified that, but I hope that wasn't offensive or too minimalistic.
Oh, not at all. And I'm sure our listening audience understands that basically what you're saying is that oftentimes, if you've been watching pornography and you've trained your brain to get stimulated and excited by that image, when you end up with a real-life person, it's not going to be as stimulating. And as a result, there's going to be erectile dysfunction or anorgasmia or something like that. That's one of the factors that absolutely could be. And then I think I understand you to have said that sometimes if somebody has erectile dysfunction, if they're having difficulty because it's physiological or psychological, they will resort to means that they know are safe. They'll look at pornography to get stimulated because they don't have to worry about being rejected, which then further exacerbates the problem and makes healthy sexuality difficult.
Yes, and my suggestion would be if you're experiencing a sexual functioning concern, just as, unless you're very mechanically inclined, that check engine light went on in your car, because I view our sexual functioning as like that check engine light. When it goes on, something's up. So when that check engine light goes on in your car, you wouldn't start to go around in it. And like I said, unless you're skilled in it, you take it to a mechanic. And so my suggestion is that when that check engine light comes on, when those sexual functioning issues come up, you go to a professional to say, what's going on here? And I wish my clients would come to me months and years before they do, because most of the time I can say, here's where we need to go from here, or here's where I'd like to assess, here's what I think is going on, before it perpetuates into an issue, before you try to tinker around in that engine yourself and all of a sudden you find yourself 9 hours on the computer watching pornography after pornography, thinking it's somehow going to fix you. So don't take matters into your own hands. Come to a sex therapist who can assist you with that. I would caution, although there are many urologists and primary care physicians that are really adept at working with sexual issues, but I do feel like the medical model may address the medical concerns, but most sexual functioning concerns are not medical. So, but obviously going to a physician is sort of part of the plan. But you said physiological and psychological. Yes, yes, yes. So part of my work is figuring out what are those causation factors and eliminating there being a health concern. So I send all of my clients to a physical, but I make sure I contact their doctor beforehand so that they know that they're working with me and that they don't try to maybe medicalize a non-medical issue, because most of the time I do not find there to be a medical issue when there's a sexual functioning concern.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. Now, were you by any chance at the ITAP conference this year, which is for certified sexual addiction therapists out in Arizona?
I was not.
Okay, because they really focused on school-age, teen, and college-age kids. And they're citing more and more studies that show that kids who have been involved with pornography from the ages of 8 on up, by the time they're 18, 19, or 20, they are unable to have erections. They're unable to complete the act of sex. They're unable to have orgasms with a normal human being. Now, if I have traditionalists or fundamentalists in the audience, they're probably sitting there going, well, good, they shouldn't be having sex until they're married. But for those people that believe that it's a natural extension of sexuality to at least experiment and get aroused around the same sex or opposite sex at, 18, 19, 20, 21, these young men and women were unable to get aroused because they had stimulated the brain to the point where they needed pornography to actually feel that arousal. So a lot of these young people are unable to have an orgasm, and so what do? They don't want to feel rejected, so they go home, and in the safety of their own homes or wherever they're at, college dorms, whatever, they continue to just get more and more invested in pornography, which further complicates their problems. Have you found this to be true?
I have, but I'd like to add just another layer on that because I agree with what the research is finding, and I found it in my clinical population as well. But what I want to say is that I truly believe the problem is not pornography and excessive consumption of it as an adolescent. I believe that in our culture, we are not communicating about sex in a way to our adolescents that leaves them feeling confident and with a healthy sexual identity so they can go out into the world and explore themselves sexually. And even, for those traditionalists, even not with another partner, but just to feel self-confident about themselves sexually. Most people who have a problem with sexual functioning or a sex addiction can establish it from a very young age. And most of the time, it wasn't being talked about, addressed, and there was no such thing as sex positivity in their adolescence and in their upbringing. So I really feel like my mission in life, like outside of the online therapy and the sex therapy, but my mission in life is to change the way our culture communicates about sex. I really feel strongly that if our adolescents and our young people could feel confident in their sexual identity, and that does not mean they need to have sex with a partner, but that they know who they are sexually, which most people in the audience, if I were to ask them, what's your sexual identity? Most people will say, I've never thought of it before. And I want us to be talking about this from the moment that we start to obtain an identity. And so I think truly the problem lies even before the access to pornography, although most of our addicts are getting access to pornography at very young ages. 5, 6, 7 years old, they're being exposed to it either through a magazine under the bed or an older sibling or something. But we're not having conversations of what it means to be a healthy sexual person. We're getting messages of no, negative, yet an infinite access to sexual messages in our life from home, from school, from online, from our culture, from television shows. And I really feel like I was put on this earth to change the way we communicate about sex. So I'm going to wind it back even more than that and say the problem lies in the fact that these young men and women who are online with pornography haven't been talked to about what it means to be a healthy sexual person.
Well, absolutely. I 100% endorse the same thing. So you're taking it down to more of a foundational issue that we don't know how to talk about sex. Parents still have difficulty talking to their kids about sex. Teachers aren't really allowed to talk about sexuality, and so there's this don't ask, don't tell kind of policy where kids are really left on their own to figure it out through, media, television, games, and their peers.
Which is a nice segue into developing healthy sexuality, which I sort of had a premonition that might be one of your next questions. Am I right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So talk a little bit about healthy sexuality.
Sure. So that question, so for our listeners, that question, what is your sexual identity? That would be my take-home action item, is to sit and think about that for a minute. Who am I as a sexual person? And what I would encourage the folks in recovery and the partners is to try to shift gears a little bit and focus on realistically, but the positive nature of who you are as a sexual person. And I'm sure you've talked about this in your program, and I've heard it about on how much a partner their sexual identity can really come into question, and who they are as a sexual person when it comes out that they have a partner who is struggling with compulsive sexual behavior or sex addiction. So that question, who am I as a sexual person? And so my assignment would be, if you're struggling with that, to maybe just do an image sort of activity. Get a stack of magazines, sit at your kitchen table, and just look through the magazines and just rip out anything that calls to you. Try not to think too much about it. Try not to say, is this representative of my sexual identity? But just take out the images and words and the experiences in those magazines and start to build a little pile. Who am I as a sexual person? And that would be my first assignment for my clients who we're starting to look at what does healthy sexuality look like in recovery. So the first is to establish that you do have an identity. You don't need to be defined by your problematic behavior. You can be healthy. So the next thing I would encourage my clients.
One of your clients, what might some of those pictures look like? I get that everybody's different, but give me an example of one of your clients and some of the magazine pictures that they tore out.
So the big name of the game on this one is body image. So especially, I guess it depends on what kind of magazine you have. If you have Time magazine versus like Cosmo, you're going to be ripping different things out. But body image is a huge part of it. We struggle in our culture to feel good about our bodies and feel good about our genitals and our secondary sexual characteristics like our breasts. And so body image, you're going to have usually a stack of people, maybe some words, some colors, depending whether you're red or blue, or maybe some blank spaces. You're going to see folks, if they truly just allow their brain to get out of the way for a minute, you're going to see symbolic images of their sexual history, which is kind of like the next place I go to, which is understanding their sexual history. And it's important because we do this with our addicts and our partners, but I do think we do it from a framework of the problem. And it's important when we're starting to focus on healthy sexuality that we do it from the framework of health. We don't ignore the fact that there was unhealthy behavior, but we try to find and highlight the areas where there was health and wellness. Because there was a healthy sexual person in there. I mean, you didn't come out of the womb acting out. You came out of the womb ready to be your best self. So really trying to focus on those areas of health and wellness. And so going through the sexual history from a sex-positive perspective, I want my clients to see their sexuality as something healthy, not something they need to be afraid of. And I think this is healthy sexuality in recovery. So this is after an established period of sobriety, abstinence, and recovery too. So I wouldn't jump the gate. I do think that there needs to be a lot of work done, which a lot of your other guests talk about. This is from that listener who says, how do I get started on this after a period of sobriety and abstinence and recovery? And then also the big thing, too, is normalizing a lot of these experiences. In our sexual history, it's a colorful journey, any way you slice it. So trying to normalize the fact that some of those different shades of gray and black and white and colors that might be in your sexual history, a lot of that is okay and normal. And trying to sort of lift the shame around some of those early sexual experiences and just let them know that they're okay and that they, function in an environment that likely didn't foster a healthy sexual identity. So that was a long answer to your question. I hope I answered it.
No, that absolutely did, because unfortunately, certainly for women, and also we're finding more and more and more for men, it does center around body image and how they feel. And And so, okay, so that might be an exercise that you would give a client to kind of uncover some of the earlier thoughts and feelings that they have about their sexuality. Now, I happen to know that certainly when I ask my clients, now, how'd you first hear about sexuality? What did your parents tell you about it? And what feelings do you associate around sexuality that came from your childhood? I usually felt feeling of loneliness, sadness, guilt, or shame. Very rarely is there any positive feeling attached to early sexual information given to them by their parents. How about you? What do you find?
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't radio silence, it was a lot of no's and don'ts. And I think it can be recognized even early on of the don't touch yourself, or, don't touch that. And what I try to do is really through my work with the client, and reparent is not the right word, but I try to use my skill and my talent as a sex therapist to allow my client to understand that we have an opportunity to build something brand new, not broken, now fixed, but we have an opportunity to kind of redo it, start over. Let's start from the baseline of your sexual health and identity, and let's build it from here on, and not ignoring the past, but focusing on, we didn't really get a chance to construct what our sexual identity was, but we can begin to construct it what we want it to be. So that's where my work comes in, is co-constructing with my clients what healthy sexuality looks like for them now. And so the way I do that is through intensive therapy, normalizing a lot of that initial experiences. I think my energy and my sort of vibe and my approach is very therapeutic for my clients. But there are a couple books that I'll leave the listeners with that I love to use right off the bat. Not mine, but I love using them. So for men, I find that The New Male Sexuality by Zilgerbeld, I think it's the last name, Zilgerbeld. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to email him and tell him I'm sorry I messed up his name, especially since my name is so hard. I should have practiced that. So it's an older book, but it's
okay, so you said it's The New Male Sexuality, and spell to the best of your ability his last name. Zilbergeld. I will email you. I'm sorry. I will email him. That's fine, and anybody who wants to ask me, they can email me at carolthecoach@AOL.com, and I will pass along that information. But again, the book is called The New Male Sexuality. And another book you might recommend?
The counterpart to that, and that is a book that, again, I would encourage for folks in recovery, strong in their sobriety, because I think talking about healthy sexuality can be triggering for folks new in their journey. So, the female counterpart to that, and I would suggest The New Male Sexuality read by both, by anyone who's interested, partners included. The female-based sort of counterpart to that is a very new book, published in 2015, called Come As You Are. And Dr. Emily Nagowski, who is a fantastic resource for the science behind female sexuality, put a lot of time and energy and effort into that book, and she is wonderful, and the book is a game changer in our field. So that would be the female counterpart, Come As You Are, and the last name of that author is Nagowski, Nagoski.
Okay, Come As You Are, Nagoski, and she's a game changer. Great book. And,
wonderful
obviously,
book.
I'm sure that our addicts and or their partners feel like their issues are a bit different than the average couple that has not had to deal with sexual addiction. And part of me says, you're right, it is different because, again, just like you said, there might be triggers. To say the word webcam could be a trigger, where to the average person it wouldn't be a trigger. And at the same time, what you and I both know to be true is sexuality is still such a taboo subject that everybody suffers from a lot of the same stuff. And so, do you feel like you treat someone who has a sexual issue differently than you would a sex addict?
So that's an interesting question. I don't think I separate the two in my brain, but I'm sensitive to it. And because I work in both, so about half my practice is sexual functioning concerns solely, and then the other half of my practice is the sex addiction and sex. It just sort of works out that way. And I do think I'm a little bit more sensitive to where they are in their journey of recovery. I suppose I'm a little bit more aware to recognize problematic behavior because I work with both. But I think I'm so client-centered that I don't treat any client the same as any other client. Every client is a sort of a unique and precious unit for me, and I really don't generalize. And anytime I feel myself trying to generalize, some client comes along and like breaks the mold. So I'm a pretty moderate as an approach. I'm pretty eclectic too. So I think I view each client really as their own individual and treat them unique to what they're presenting with.
Okay, very good. Now, how might someone who's recovering from sex and love addiction develop a healthy sexuality and a healthy sex life?
Okay, so I would say, again, don't tinker around in that car by yourself. So find a professional. And I would say begin by working with a sex therapist who understands and supports how you define your addiction or compulsion. So call and interview and see, here's what's going on, here's what I'd like to work on, and see if they'd be willing to help you begin to develop a healthy sexuality with yourself or your partner. I do sometimes feel like this is a difficult transition for folks who specialize in working in addiction to make. I find that I have found, I guess I should say, that sometimes it's easy to talk about pathological sexual behavior, but it's not as easy to make the transition in talking about healthy sexual behavior. And I have found this to be the case in 12-steps groups too, where there's like a lot of support and a lot of literature in stopping problematic. But when it comes time to develop healthy, it's like not as much available out there. So I think finding someone like me and like yourself, Carol, that's really open to that is really supportive. And I think you'll just be able to find that by calling around, any therapist on the CSAT, where you can find your CSATs, or I'm associated with SASH, the Society for Advancement of Sexual Health, on those listservs. And then I'm an ASEX certified sex therapist, and there is sort of a little bit of a split field on some of that, so you want to make sure that you call practitioners to make sure that they fit your needs. I think you could also work with a couples therapist who's really comfortable with sexual issues. I have a podcast beginning this summer, Love and Sex in ATX, so Austin, Texas, Love and Sex in Austin, Texas. And my counterpart, Dr. Mathis Kennington, is a wonderful psychotherapist who specializes in intimacy and couples issue. He wouldn't be on any of those websites, but he's a fantastic resource. So I think you just interview your therapist. If you're working with your partner to construct healthy sexuality, make sure both you and your partner talk to that therapist, see if it's the right fit, because that's really going to predict success in the work, is if you really connect with your therapist. I think so. Starting with the professional from there would be my suggestion, and just being really open-minded and realize that you're going to be doing some difficult work that should have been done decades ago, but also understand that this is such a beautiful opportunity. And this is why I love working in the field of sex addiction. And I know you said this on your program before, but that it's an opportunity. Even though it may feel like the most devastating experience of your life, it is a gift, and it will change everything, including how you view yourself sexually. And I love working in this field because I see people like come in as caterpillars and leave as beautiful butterflies, and it's the most rewarding experience. And so through that sort of cauldron, out comes the phoenix. So I think it's a really beautiful transition.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. And so as we begin to end the show, I want to remind people that I'm speaking with Rhiannon Beauregard, and her last name is Beauregard. You can reach her by going to www.sextherapy-online.com and take a look at her website, see if she's somebody that can work with you. She very specifically said that she recommends certified sex therapists who are ASAC trained, and that is AASECT, and that's the gold standard for sex therapists, just like CSAT are the gold standard for sexual addiction. So, Rhiannon, I would highly recommend that people contact you if they have questions, and it sounds like that's going to be an exciting podcast. What venue are you using for that podcast?
Well, so it will be an Austin-based podcast on sex, love, and relationships, really incorporating the culture and excitement of Austin, Texas, which is just a great city. So we will be on iTunes and just sort of in final stages of recording development, and off we go. So make sure you take a listen for us. I'll make sure I email you too, Carol. And just as two final notes on what you said. So if seeking out an ASAC certified sex therapist, just also make sure that they're comfortable with working in sex addiction. So that just would be something that you'd want to ask them. And the last thing I want to say, too, is that I know that there's been talk around fetishes and healthy sexuality when it comes to sex addiction. I would be happy to come back on the show and talk at length about that, because that's another area of my expertise. I know we don't have the time today, but I do know that a listener has some concerns about that, and I would be happy to be back on your show.
I would love to have you back on to talk about that. So we need to end for tonight, but I so appreciate your information, your enthusiasm, and your passion to make the world a better place around their human sexuality. And we will definitely be talking again. Good luck on your podcast. You make sure to let me know when that goes and pass that on to my listeners, too. And I just really appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thanks so much, Carol. Have a wonderful evening.
Hey, you too. All right, that was Rhiannon Beauregard, and obviously she is a certified sex therapist, and we're so happy to have had her on the show. You can tell that she really believes in what she's doing. So we have to end for tonight, and we went a little bit long. I so appreciate you. I want to tell you that, as always, there are only going to be one of you at all times. Fearlessly have the courage to be yourself, and believe it or not, I'm the hardest working therapist in the United States. Okay, well, maybe I'm not, but I am going to be on next week on Memorial Day. So make sure to check out the show. I'm going to have Gary Wilson on, who has done a wonderful video. It's renowned. And the video is Your Life on Porn. And so please check us out next week as we have more sex help with Carol the Coach. And as always, you make your life best possible, and I'll hang out with you to make sure that we're working together for you to find true recovery and take your life to the next level. You have a great week.